Hi, is there supposed to be a presentation?
I believe so. I'm having it researched.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm not 100% sure I'm in the right place.
I believe this was supposed to be the technology mentoring one.
Yes.
So I just checked with someone to see if we were supposed to see a presentation.
Yes.
And they said they were working on
it. Okay, that should be me.
Oh.
I just didn't actually have a Zoom link, so I didn't know where to be. And they just sent it to me. So I was trying to figure out where I was supposed to be.
Gotcha.
Looks like we are all here. I'll wait for some others to join. Okay, let's see if I can share my screen. Hey, Farron. How are you?
Hi.
We both have on denim shirts today. I don't know how many people are supposed to be here.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't think anyone pre-registered. Like, we were just kind of sent off into breakout rooms. So like, huh?
They assigned you to a room.
No, they did not. You just got to pick. Like, they opened up this, they showed you the topic of each room, and then people got to pick. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's like so funny. I was gonna text you because I was like in here, and I was like, this is not like her. I was like, something must be going on. I should have followed my first mind and texted you.
I was also confused and trying to figure out what was going on and what was happening. I don't know if others, I didn't know what was going on. I was just like, they told me they would send me a link, and then I couldn't find the link. I was like, where is the link? But someone emailed it to me, so that worked out.
Yeah, so I think because like other people, like everyone else has already started, so I think this might be it for now. And then they're recording all the sessions, and they're going to make them available like after, like so people can watch, because they're doing all the sessions concurrently, and so you had to like pick one. So
they did not make me a host. So I have limited capabilities here.
Oh, you
And
can't share your screen?
I cannot share my screen, nor can I.
Courtney, is that something you can help
record.
with?
Yeah, Courtney, I see you are co-host.
Hi, yeah, so I am recording. That's my purpose for here, but I can research it for you if you just give me a moment.
I think you can make me a host if you are a co-host.
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Okay.
How are you doing, Janina?
Tired.
I know, I saw in your social, you've been doing a lot of talks lately.
I know, I'm like, I gotta stop. This is
No, this is being recorded, so we're gonna.
a reminder.
I have to remind
No,
myself too. This is being recorded, so
I've
I'm
been
not
doing
saying
a lot
anything.
of talks. Which, you know, like I said, I mean, but I do have to, like, you know, cut back because I have to do other stuff.
Because you have a job, right?
I really have 3 jobs. But yeah, I have a job. So while we're waiting for that to be set up, for this talk, I'm also going to do this on Clubhouse. So I don't know if you guys are on Clubhouse, ever heard of Clubhouse. If you haven't heard of Clubhouse, or if you need an invite, let me know and I will send you one. And I'm doing it on Clubhouse, and I'm also doing it on Twitter Live. So
you're simulcasting right now?
Not yet. I'm about to turn it on. I was
waiting. I have Clubhouse.
Okay, if you have Clubhouse, if you follow me, you should be able to see me in the room.
I have not actually.
I don't know what Clubhouse is.
Okay.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. So Janina, if you want to go back to the main room, Mike is going to help you so you can share your screen.
Okay, so how do I do that?
So if you leave the breakout room, it should automatically take you to the main room.
Oh, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Shouldn't take very long.
Okay, we are back. Small group. Good. It's okay. So I can do a trial. Can everyone hear me? You can hear me? I'm assuming so.
Yes.
Okay. So I am giving this talk on using technology to create your mentoring mosaic. I said in the beginning that I'm also broadcasting this talk through Twitter and Clubhouse. So hopefully I should be able to share my screen now. Yes. And I will share my screen. And hold on. we're going to talk a little bit more about what I do. 1 second. Talk a little bit more about what I do. And then I want to talk a little bit more about my experience with mentorship. And then towards the end, we're going to get into some of the tools you can use, really accessing technology in order to build out your mentoring mosaic. Okay, oops, I keep sharing the wrong thing. Technology is really trying me today, which is ironic given the title of this talk. Okay, you should be able to see my slides now. Is that true?
I can see them.
I'm trying to present them, so hopefully that also works. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So now that I have that set up, before I get started, I am also going to go on Twitter live, which will be a first for me. Hold on 1 second. Okay. It has to make sure I have a stable internet connection. Okay, so I am live on all the things. I am on Twitter and on Clubhouse, but we're going to really get into Twitter and Clubhouse much later. So I want to talk about and first introduce you guys to who I am. My name is Dr. Jeff. I am a senior bioinformatics scientist at Illumina. I also host a podcast called In Those Genes, and you're going to hear a little bit of the podcast today, as well as hear a lot about my mentoring journey. So I like to refer to myself as a geneticist, and I have the cis kind of as something separate. And really what I'm doing is talking about W.E.B. Du Bois' double consciousness, which is having two opposing Black experiences. And so I have an experience as a scientist, as a formally trained Ph.D. geneticist. And, a play upon words is I also have an experience, a lived experience as a Black woman in science and a Black woman in America. And the intersection of these two consciousness is really what has shaped, I would say, my identity and what I call geneticist. But in addition to being a scientist, I also have a podcast. And so this is the part where I ask you all to subscribe to my podcast and become fans of a podcast. You are going to listen to a clip in the next slide. But I have a podcast in addition to my 9-to-5 job called In Those Genes. And it's a podcast that uses genetics to decode the histories and futures of African descendants. We do this using Black culture and changing the language of science to make it more accessible to the Black community. So you can listen to the podcast anywhere you hear podcasts. But one of the biggest things that we do in the podcast is we translate complex genetic concepts into a different language, a language that is accessible to everyone, and really trying to do this thing of decolonizing DNA. And so I want to start off with a clip of the podcast to give you an example of how I do this. And then I'm going to go through my journey, my career journey, and talk about the different mentors that got me there, and then transition a little bit more into how I use technology to maintain and keep these relationships. Okay, so the clip of the podcast that I'm going to be playing today is from episode 9, season 1. And episode 9 focuses on the All of Us research program. At the beginning of this episode, I am describing a technique called fine mapping. And fine mapping is a technique that is used in genetics, and that's what's pictured on the left side of this slide. And I'm going to describe this using Black culture. So hopefully you can hear. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear once I start pressing play. If you can't hear, also let me know, because technology, ironically, has not been my friend today.
Fine mapping is a way that allows scientists to look at the genome and determine exactly where variations that cause disease arise. To explain this further, pack your bag, grab your snacks, get that aux cord. We're going on a road trip. Well, 2 road trips actually, but the same destination, kind of. The destination is the cure to a disease, and we're traveling along the genome to get there. I feel like we're taking steps on like a DNA helix. We're just like, The first road trip, we're opening up our navigation app called Euromaps. It's a map of the human genome based on European samples. Folks of European descent split off from folks of African descent about 40,000 years ago. Because of this split, their genome holds a lot less variation than folks of African descent, an older and more admixed population. Less variation means less information about the history of humanity. That means that Euromaps is a little vague, like Siri on a rainy day. So we're on our road trip, and Euromaps is just saying,
I think it's the next left. No, right, wait, no, it's left. Go left.
or
Make a right at the light, then go down for about 4 or 5 minutes, until you see an old man with a dog. Yeah, that's the one, the Pomeranian.
it has some idea where we're going, but the directions are far from precise. So we pull up to our final destination, and Euromaps yells out,
Ah yes, I think this is it. Well actually, I don't know, it kind of looks familiar.
and we're standing in an empty parking lot. Euromaps says,
It's in the neighborhood, I'm sure of it.
and we can spend days, hours, years, even decades figuring out just where in this neighborhood the cure to our disease is. Or we can use Afro maps. Afro maps is based on a ton of information amassed over hundreds of thousands of years of variation in the African genome. It's the root of where all other genomes begin. So it not only has information of its own genomes, but also the genomes of others. So Afromaps is precise like,
In a quarter of a mile, take a slight right onto MLK Boulevard. Continue on to Flatbush Ave for 2 miles. Then make a left after the light. No, back up. You passed it. You gotta make a U-turn. Alright, your destination is on the right. You've reached the disease cure right between the red house and the green house. It's the black one, right there in the middle. Yeah, with the grill out front.
we hop out and see exactly where in the genome the cause of our disease is, and we can begin making drugs to assess the problem. I mean, imagine all the time, energy, and gas we done used on Euromaps when we could have just used Afro maps and got there on a half a tank in under 2 hours. Talk about efficiency. This is just an abbreviated version of the complexity of fine mapping.
Excuse me. Oh goodness. Especially when it's my turn to talk, I'm choking on something. So that's an example of that's the example of the podcast. Now I want to talk a little bit about my journey. And I want to start with the central dogma. So for those of you who are not familiar, the central dogma is one of the most common, one of the first concepts you'll ever learn in genetics. And it really teaches the flow of genetic information in a biological system. And so we start off with DNA, which is, you can think about this as the instructions of life. And DNA is transcribed into something called RNA, and then RNA is translated into proteins, and proteins actually carry out the function. I like to think of my career or my path as a scientist as somewhat similar to the central dogma. And this is the traditional, I would say, career path of a scientist, a PhD trained scientist. After you finish undergrad, you go on to get a PhD, at which point most of the time you will get a postdoc, and then you will enter the world of academia and become an assistant professor. And I think about this first PhD as transcribing fundamental scientific knowledge into a thesis project that you or your PI thinks the world should care about. So I want to talk about my first mentor, my PhD advisor. Her name is Dr. Dana Crawford, and I found her after doing rotation. So I did my PhD at Vanderbilt, and our first year we got to rotate in different departments with different labs, which is very different than some PhD programs where you'd go directly into the lab. But this was my first mentoring experience. Now, this experience was a in-person experience. This was a mentorship that was decided upon between both parties after getting to know each other quite well during that rotation. That then, oops, that then was my first experience with this type of mentor. So before going to Vanderbilt, I also have had, and I think we all have had mentors, whether they be people a part of our community, whether they be coworkers, whether they be other forms of relationships that we've built over the years for support. But particularly in science, mentorship holds a lot of different significance. And in the context of getting your PhD advisor or mentor will be the most significant person that helps determine your success and your ability to complete that PhD. And so that is a very, very important relationship. After doing my PhD, I went on and got a postdoc. And so I consider a postdoc as translating that thesis project that you just did in your PhD into a research program that you think the world should care about. So here you're doing a lot more independent things. You're developing a new skill set. You're doing creativity, maybe some writing, leadership. The goal here is to also start gaining notoriety and networking. And I really want to talk about independence and networking because it's really important when we talk about mentorship at that postdoc stage. So I did a postdoc in personalized medicine, but I considered myself to be more of a communal postdoc. So when I was doing my PhD, I actually had multiple mentors. I didn't have one mentor. On paper, my one person, my postdoc advisor was Erwin Bottinger. But Erwin actually did not know, or I wouldn't say was deeply involved in the research that I was doing. So while he was the director of the department, the research projects that I worked on were mainly with other scientists. And so it was really important for me to start building this mentoring mosaic. And I did this by trying to identify what are different things that I want to gain through my postdoc and how can I leverage these things in other people who I have access to in this department. And so, like I said, Erwin was the one who recruited me to Mount Sinai where I did my postdoc. And while I was at Mount Sinai, I really quickly became connected to Dr. Emer Kinney. So Dr. Emer Kinney is a population geneticist. And I, at the time, was really, really interested in learning more population genetics. I had did my PhD in human genetics, and most of it was focused on genetic epidemiology. So I hadn't actually had formal training in population genetics. And so I considered her as being a person that I can learn things from, and also a person that I can begin to build a relationship. We hadn't known each other before then. Then Ruth Luz, a more senior professor in the department, she worked on genetic epidemiology. And so this is someone who worked on things that I have been working on during my postdoc. Also, she's very senior, so she has a large network of scientists that I could connect with and meet and actually develop new relationships outside of the ones that I already had at Vanderbilt, already had at Spelman, which I didn't get a chance to mention. I went to Spelman College for undergrad and was beginning to develop at Mount Sinai. And then later on, maybe about 2 years into my postdoc, Ron Doe joined. And so Ron Doe, he is also a geneticist. He focuses on, I would say, how would I say this? I would say new genomic methods. So one of the things that he focuses on is how we can predict risk before the development of disease. And so he is a K-99 recipient. And for those of you who do not know what a K-99 is, it's a prestigious grant that really funds independent researchers. And you can get this grant through the NIH as a postdoc. You do not have to be a US citizen, so it's extremely competitive. And this is how I started to build this mentorship team through my postdoc. Now I want to talk about each of these mentors kind of offered different things. So Dr. Kinney, she offered me an opportunity to pursue leadership. I was the first person to join her lab. She was an eager junior scientist. She had just had a big publication in Science, so lots of new ideas. And like I said, she was a well-renowned population geneticist. And then Ruth Luz, also very well-known, very different projects, very genetic epidemiology. But because she's more senior, she had a lot of projects waiting in queue. And Dr. Ron Doe, like I said, he came there straight out of his postdoc with the K-99. So he had a lot of experience with writing, and he's an expert in medical genomics. And so I was able to use their skill sets to do different things. For example, working with Emer Kinney was probably my day-to-day mentorship. She would be a person that I would go to about my project. She helped me develop my projects because I had a project with each professor in this department. And I was really strategic on how I picked those projects. So with Emer Kinney, my focus was on, I call it sexy science. This was on very cutting edge science because she was getting a lot of notoriety and recognition for asking different questions and new questions. And I was also learning the skill set of population genetics. And with Ruth Luz, because she was so established, I was really able to very quickly pick up a project in her lab and take that project and turn it into a paper. And then Rondo, we were completely different, but I learned a lot from him. I actually wrote my own K99 award. And it was really, it was scored highly. I'll get into in a second what happened with that. And then, but he worked on something completely different than what I was working on. And so in that experience, I was able to learn something different. And if you ever need an opportunity to kind of turn a learning experience into something that is tangible and that you can, leverage going forward, I highly suggest you write a review paper. And so with him, I wrote a review paper. With Emer, I wrote a K99 R01 and got a lot of different awards. And with Ruth Luz, I was able to get on a Nature Genetics paper on an existing project that had already been going on. And so I like to consider myself personally as being a part of the non-conventional central dogma. That's because after I finished my postdoc, I did not go on to be an assistant professor. And that was because when I was thinking about academia, reality hit. And the reality of academia is that, yes, you can do sexy science, but sexy science may not align with the things that you actually want to ask, and that academia has a dark side, right? So you do need a lot of mentorship because there's a lot of politics in academia, but there's a lot of politics really in every thing in every field that you go to. So you really do need mentors. And at this time, I was looking for mentors that could help me in the decision-making process. I knew that I did not want to be an assistant professor. I did not want to go into academia for the reasons I had just mentioned. I didn't think that I could be able to work on the research I wanted to. And so I did still want to do science. And so I prioritized what are the things that are most important to me? Okay, I know science is extremely important. I want to be able to continue to do science. I also want to be able to do teaching and mentorship. I also want to be able to have a great lifestyle. Anyone who's been in school for a long time can probably understand that actually, you really do want to be able to live in a place that you like, live in a place where you have family, live in a place where you have friends. These things become increasingly important, especially in trying to your overall happiness, which leads to better work, honestly. And I also still wanted to do research. So that being said, I use my mentorship Mosaic to really carve out, well, what are the different sectors that I can figure out how to take these 4 important things and turn them into a career. So these 4 sectors were big pharma, direct to consumer, genetic testing, government, and biotechnology. And so I chose to leave academia because I couldn't do that. I couldn't do the science that I wanted to. And I chose to work in biotechnology. And so I work at Illumina. And when I was selecting my job to go to Illumina, I was able to identify that Illumina was a place where I could have all the 4 things that I wanted. And so I chose to work at Illumina. And in addition to the things that I wanted, I was able to gain something even bigger. I was able to carve out time to do teaching and mentorship, which is a large part of what I do, speaking engagements. I was also able to do more STEAM activism. And so that's kind of like, I like to say, creating a village for those who don't have any. But some of the things that I think people don't realize that you can do in biotech, like publishing, I was able to have a broader network. So a lot of biotech companies are global. So the people who you work with are not the small lab that you may experience in your PhD and your postdoc. They're much bigger. For example, I, get to meet with the director of the NIH of Korea. It's called KIH, ironically. So like really trying to, figure out how can I still grow as a scientist in a way that might not be traditional. But all of this requires a lot of mentorship. And in addition to like your formal career, you also want to be able to figure out what are some of the things that you can do outside of your 9 to 5. And so I'm kind of drifting here, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about is like by making this decision that involved, you know, really a lot of mentorship from my mentors, the ones who I just mentioned, all the way from my PhD and onward, is that I wanted to be able to carve out the lifestyle and the career that I wanted. And that career, and I don't know if anyone else experiences this, has always gone beyond a 9 to 5. When I was in high school, I was a part of an organization. I created an organization called ICE, which was initiating a circle of education in addition to going to high school and working. When I was in college, I was always engaged in a lot of extracurricular activity, especially around volunteer work and mentoring. And as a PhD student, I was in a program called Scientists in the Classroom. I also did Boys and Girls Club. So being a mentor and carving out time for mentorship is extremely important to me, but also having an outlet that's connected to the community outside of my science, because again, I'm a Black woman with a lived experience. It is a part of what I say makes me whole. You know, finishing work every day and feeling like I accomplished something is bigger than just the science. Is also a part of the community in creating this village or networking. So that being said, I, in addition to being a scientist, have carved out this, you know, me tailoring this central dogma of my career into a career in science communications. Like in the beginning of the talk, talked about my podcast. But the other thing that I'm extremely passionate about is creating a village for those in need of one. And so these are just some of the pictures of my volunteer and give back work. And I'm highlighting this because up until this point, I was talking about how I am using how I'm using my mentor, or how I use my mentors to help develop my career. It's also important that, you know, you always have both a mentor hat and a mentee hat. And so, like I said, creating a village for those who doesn't have one is kind of paying back what I have gained from my mentors over time. Now, I want to say everything that I've talked about is kind of like this traditional way of mentoring, where someone formally introduces you into a mentor, or because of a program or something connected to your professional network, you meet people and you become you develop these relationships in person. But it's 2021, right? We just went through a global pandemic, and we are now transitioning to a new phase of, you know, how do we leverage technology to build relationships? So before I talk about that, and before I talk about some of the tools we can use, and before we get interactive and actually have a conversation on Clubhouse and on Twitter, which looks like it has died on me, I want to talk a little bit about what are some of the key things you need to build this mosaic. And you heard my experience, but this was before I got all this knowledge on what are some of the things that I could have been doing. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that I've done since then. But first, oops, wrong way. First, and I'm still going the wrong way. Hold on. I want to play this video.
I think the distinction between an advisor, a mentor, and a sponsor is a very important one. When you think about popular business press, everyone talks about a mentor and the importance of having a mentor, but I haven't found any place yet where they really describe what a good mentor is, and they delineate between a mentor and a sponsor and an advisor. And I've been talking about a mentor and a sponsor publicly in my speeches for about 15 or 16 years, and now I'm starting to see people write about it, so I'm quite excited about that. But let's talk about what the distinction is. An advisor is someone that you ask discrete questions to. Can you show me how to calculate a weighted average cost of capital? Can you tell me how I need to assemble my first consulting presentation? Can you tell me how I should operate a camera if I'm doing my own video, if you will? Discrete questions. And a mentor is a person that you can tell the good, the bad, and the ugly to. So it needs to be somebody that you trust. You need to be able to say, boy, I really screwed up on that particular project. This is what happened. This is what the person told me. I'm not sure how I navigate that or what I should do to recover from that. And it was a huge mistake. Or I really am interested in accelerating my progress here. Who should I talk to? What relationship is important? How should I work the system, if you will, in order to make that happen? In that kind of conversation, you're sharing more intimacies about your career and your career aspirations. So the person that you're talking to needs to be somebody that you trust. And more importantly, when your mentor is talking to you, they need to have one agenda item, and that agenda item should be you. The mentor does not need to be someone internal to your organization. It can be someone that's external to your organization, but that person needs to understand your context, the playpen, if you will, in which you're playing. So when they give you tailored advice, and that's a mentor's job, to give you tailored advice, they can tailor it not only to you and your aspirations, but also to your context. A sponsor, on the other hand, is not the person that you tell the good, the bad, and the ugly to. The sponsor is the person that you tell the good, and the good to, because that's the person that's carrying your paper into the room. That's the person that behind closed doors will argue passionately on your behalf as to why you should get promoted this year, as to why you should get the top bonus or the top pay this year, as to why you ought to have that new international opportunity. That person is spending their political capital on your behalf, and they should be passionate about doing that. You can survive for a very long time in your career without a mentor, but you will not move up in any organization without a sponsor. So of all of the three relationships, the sponsor is the most important one to have. Most companies will assign you a mentor when you come in the door, but you should think about that person not as a mentor, but as an advisor. They don't know you. You don't know them. So how can you have a relationship where you're sharing all of your career aspirations? Now, that advisory relationship may turn into a mentoring relationship over time, but you should think about it in your own mind as an advisory relationship, and you will hopefully turn that one into a mentoring relationship or find another mentor. But again, the most important relationship to have with respect to your moving up is that sponsor relationship.
Okay, so that was Carla Harris. Carla Harris has a lot of different, accolades. One of the things I actually heard her speak for the first time at Mount Sinai. At the time, she was on the board of directors, the first Black woman on the board of directors for Mount Sinai, but she also has been on Wall Street. And she has a book called Carla's Pearls, where she talks about these different strategies and angles. But a lot of the conversation that she's talking, a lot of things that she's talking about are very specific to corporate America. And also a lot of the things that she's talking about is also not extremely relevant in the context of technology and what's going on now. So how can we take some of these same principles that she talks about, these different relationships, and turn them into modern day practice? So just to go over them again, she mentioned having an advisor, a mentor, and a sponsor, with a sponsor being the most significant person that you need to build a relationship with. So an advisor is somebody that you can ask questions to. This would be similar to someone who can help you with your thesis project, or someone who could help you with, learning a technique or a concept that you need to help you get to that next step. Then you have a mentor, and a mentor is more of a personal relationship, but someone who likely had the same experience. And so, like I talked about the people who helped me up until this point as being mentors. And every one of the mentors that I had mentioned in my PhD and in my postdoc, we are similar in the similar fact that they have gone through the experience that I've gone through. And on top of that, we worked very closely together. So there was a relationship built there. I can contact them. They know me personally. And then a sponsor. And I actually didn't really talk about a sponsor in my experience, but one way to think about a sponsor is someone who advocates for you when you're not in the room. And I would say probably most scientists and PhDs, that sponsor most of the time is your PhD advisor or your PI. So who is your advisor, and how does this look like in science? In science, this is someone who's currently doing something that you're doing or not far removed from it. So you could think about this as being a lab mate. This could be collaborators that you work on a project. And again, all of these people you can ask very pointed questions to. For example, how did you get this data? How did you get this result? Can you teach me how to do this? Can you teach me how to do that? This is someone who really does advise you on the things that you need to learn in order to get forward. And so in the context of an undergraduate situation, that would be an upperclassman. In the context of, being in a class, that could be a classmate. Or what about people that you don't know? And that's really where technology comes in. So all of the things that I've talked about so far have been in the context of people who we know. But how do we begin to have access to people who we don't know? So how can you start to find an advisor? Again, an advisor is someone who gives you pointed advice. This is someone who tells you, this is how you do X, this is how you do Y. Hold on, I see somebody talking in the chat, so I'm gonna stop for a second just in case I'm missing something. This is how you do X, this is how you do Y. How do you get access to people that you don't know? So I am a computational scientist. I do a lot of coding. I joke all the time with people that I think people think that I'm this master coder. I never had a coding class before going to Vanderbilt. Actually, not even at Vanderbilt did I have a formal coding class. I had to do everything self-taught. But really what I do on a day-to-day basis, and I joke about this all the time on social media, is that I'm like, how do I know how to code this? How do I know how to code that? And that's when I start to, hit the Googles, as people say, and try to really leverage technology to answer some of these questions. So how can I answer these questions and leverage technology in order to find someone who would be an advisor? This would be someone who could give me an answer to a question that I need immediately and right now. And so I want to talk about some of the resources that are, I would say, now very commonly used. And I'm going to talk about them particularly in the context of where you will meet someone who you don't know. So Discord, if those of you have not already heard of Discord, and that is represented by this icon right here, is a platform that is very similar to Slack. And those of you who are not familiar with Slack and Discord are both chat engaged platforms, but that are in some cases open, in some cases not open, but very specific to a project, very specific to a group or a team. And so you could use both Slack or Discord to look for channels in the context of Slack or Discord communities that are talking or doing things that you're specifically doing. So let's say you have a question, you said, I want to learn how to do X or Y. How do I develop this experiment? Well, perhaps you would go and look for a Slack for people who do wet lab work. I'm being very general here because I'm trying not to be very specific, but let's say you worked in the cancer biology lab, okay? And you were trying to learn how do you work with HeLa cells, and you joined a Black in Cancer. So Black in Cancer is one of the networks, and I'm gonna talk about this, but you should also leverage networks. Black in Cancer and Black in has been a hashtag in the last year since COVID, where Black scientists of different disciplines have developed a social platform for us to connect and communicate with. Majority of them also have a Slack or Discord channel. So you can find these professional networks either on Twitter using hashtags, or you can find them through Google and other channels. Google Groups is another good example of this. And so both Slack and Discord provide an opportunity for you to chat with someone live and direct. And what does that mean? That means that I can go into Slack right now and ask someone a question, and I will likely get an answer, because once I ask that question, a notification goes out, but it goes out in a very targeted way to only the people who are part of that community. And so joining these communities will give you access to someone who is an advisor who you may not know yet. And every context that I'm talking about in the context of technology will be people that you don't know. Now, bioinformaticians, me specifically, I go to a place called Stack Overflow. So if you haven't heard of Stack Overflow, and I think they do more than coding, but I go to Stack Overflow mostly because they always have the answers to the random most challenges, coding questions that I have for the day. And so platforms like Stack Overflow is another resource where you can ask a question to a community and you get direct answers back to you that will help you solve a given problem. Now, those are kind of like live and direct platforms that you can do. How can you leverage something like social media, okay, to meet people who can be an advisor? And again, an advisor is someone that you can ask a targeted question to that will help you, they'll help you through a situation. Now, I'm talking about it in a very technical aspect because we're scientists here, but you can also think about it in a loose aspect of kind of like, how do I pick the right PhD program? How do I decide what's best for my postdoc, right? And so you can use social media as well. So if I started this talk by asking everyone to join me on Clubhouse or on Twitter. I'm live on Twitter, and I am also on Clubhouse right now hosting an open conversation. And Clubhouse came about in the last year. It started with a bunch of, well, I think there's a creator, but it was supported by a bunch of VCs in San Francisco. And one of the unique things about it, it has been in beta state since around this time last year. And in order to be a part of the Clubhouse community, you had to get an invite. And so what it really kind of led to was a bunch of people who had access through another person, and that person invited them, and this person invited them. And it spread and spread. And now I think there's over 5 or 6 million people on Clubhouse now. When I joined Clubhouse, there was only 10,000 people. And this was late September. We're not even a year out. But one of the great things about Clubhouse is that you can have conversations with people. So if you join Clubhouse, and if anyone who needs an invite to Clubhouse, please email me. I'm gonna put my email in the chat, and I'll also put my cell phone number in the chat since it's such a small group. Hi, Vanessa. Oh, no, you're not here anymore. You can email me or send me a message, and I will send you an invite to Clubhouse. And so with Clubhouse, you are able to have conversations around particular topics. And so when you join Clubhouse, the things that you're going to be looking for are for the clubs. And there are clubs that are very direct and pointed to specific problems. And particularly, there are clubs that are out there that are focused on mentorship, helping you create your mentoring mosaic. There are clubs that are focused on, in my case, like I like a lot of the population genetics, but also there are clubs and discussions happening that are focused on things that you may not be privy to. So like one of the things I recently learned about was NFTs, and basically how you can create your own NFT through blockchain and kind of like leverage some of the work that you're doing to make money. So there are literally topics in Clubhouse to talk about anything. So it's a really good resource for you to find things that you're interested in. But most importantly, it is a way for you to network and connect with people that you don't know, and particularly people who have the same interests as you. Now, another one that everyone, I'm sure most of you are familiar with in this room, is LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a very powerful tool, particularly for meeting people that you don't know in your professional network. However, I don't know that I would recommend LinkedIn for the context of finding an advisor. And the reason why I say that is because there are some limitations with developing relationships with people on LinkedIn is not as straightforward, direct, and live as there are with other platforms like Discord, Slack, and Clubhouse. Now, Twitter is a very powerful resource. I encourage everyone to have a professional Twitter account. And the reason why is because Twitter is probably where I would say most of the most important conversations happen the fastest in any field, but particularly in science. Every conference that I've gone to, the biggest discussion platform is Twitter. And from Twitter, you'll meet people who can connect you to private Slack channels and Discord communities where you can have more intimate conversations and find those advisors. Okay, so let's talk about mentors. I talked about mentors a lot because we call mentors people who we have a personal relationship with. This is someone whose sole purpose is to uplift you. But ideally, this person has also once walked in your shoes. This is someone who is in a position that you can see yourself in and has likely had similar experiences. And the similar experiences part is really important. And I say that because when you are a person in the science community and you are trying to understand, you're in the science community and you're trying to understand how to navigate difficult situations in the context of being a Black woman or someone who is underrepresented, ideally you want to have a mentor who's had that same experience. So when you come to them and you say, hey, this happened in the lab, I don't know if this is due to sexism or racism, or is this added layer onto it, that person will be able to understand that scenario a little bit more, but also be able to advise you on it because this person has already gone there and has already passed through this difficult situation that you're currently in. They can probably give you unbiased insight on how do you navigate that situation. And hopefully they give you hope that you can come out of it. So really, the thing about the mentor that is really different, this is not the same as the mentor that I talked about, which is like my PI or my postdoc advisors. Those people knew me, but did they know me very well? And I think I didn't have this education when I was doing this, but like really finding a mentor is bigger than just someone who kind of like is pushing you along professionally. Ideally, this person knows your professional challenges because they've gone through them, but also this person knows you very personally. And it is someone that you trust because again, you're coming to them with very intimate questions, very intimate conversations about your experience and how to navigate that experience. So some examples of this at very different stages are career counselors, also friends who are working in your field, old coworkers, people who are, I don't have this on here, but for example, if you are at an institution, a lot of times there are a lot of support groups. So again, going back to like that Black in genetics or Black in neuroscience, all of these groups that you can get access to through the last thing that I just talked about, you can also develop mentor relationships. But it's really important that these mentors have the same qualities. Now, how do you find your mentor, or how do you locate mentors, that people that you don't know? How can we use technology in order to do this? Where there are a lot of resources online, and one of them you can find by this virtual mentoring portal. If you Google virtual mentoring portal, it should pull up mentoring.org, which is a resource that you can use to sign up for a mentor. And one of the reasons why I would recommend that is because in addition to you initiating that relationship, the mentors are also a part of that network and engaged, where I think one of the biggest pitfalls in developing a mentor is a lot of times we identify mentors who, one, we don't know, and two, we don't understand. And because we don't know and we don't understand them, it becomes really difficult to maintain that relationship. And as I said, the relationship is the most important part of a mentor-mentee relationship. So first thing you need to do is remember the goal. The goal here is to build a relationship. Now, when we're thinking about technology, it's really difficult to do that because in the context of social media, in the context of social networking, you don't really know people, but you can get to know them depending on how much they are in the virtual space. So for example, I'm just going to use let me not use myself. I can use myself as an example, but yeah, I'll use myself as an example just for the sake of context. I have a lot of mentees who I've met solely through technology. And these mentees and I have met several different ways, and mentors. Most of the time it's been through social media. So I wouldn't say I'm a very public person, but I do share a lot of my professional information and news and things that I'm doing on social media. It's very public. So I would say I'm a very public facing, and that gives people access to get to know my work, to get to know things about me. Therefore, students who are looking for mentors who are doing similar work already know that, hey, Dr. Jeff is working on this very specific thing that I'm interested in, or Dr. Jeff is doing a couple of things that I'm interested in. They now have access to get to know me as a person through my public facing, persona that is developed through social media. And most importantly, they're able to use things like Clubhouse, like anyone can come into this Clubhouse room that we're hosting right now and have a conversation with us. That's a direct live communication. And again, we're still humans, so we actually will, that relationship or that experience will likely last longer than a cold email or a cold LinkedIn message. But if you are doing those types of, if you are doing a cold email or cold LinkedIn message, you have to remember that, again, you want to make sure that you have a lasting impression on the person you're sending a message to that is extremely intentional, right? A lot of times the mentors that we are seeking out get faced with a lot of messages. They already have perhaps their own mentoring mosaic. How can you add to that? How can you build upon what already exists for your mentor? And also, how can you flip the coin and become a mentor, right? So then how can you start to leverage these platforms where you've now gained mentors to now to be a mentee, to now become a mentor and learn from them? And so it's really important that you engage with them. How do I mean that? So let's say I am interested in Jenna, let me pick somebody else. I was gonna say Jennifer Doudna, but I'll talk about her. Yeah, let's say Jennifer Doudna. So if you don't know, she is the person who created the CRISPR technology, and CRISPR is a method in which you can do gene editing. It is sexy science, super, super sexy science. And I wanted her to be my mentor. She is recently a Nobel laureate. She is a woman in science. We have a lot of things in common. How can I build a relationship with her? Well, the first thing is I need to get to know her. So because she's such a public facing person, I can leverage social media and technology to really get to know who she is as a person. And in a way, get to know her professionally. And it's very important that you mention that, because when it comes time to reach out and send a message to her, I now have all the information to connect with her on a very human level. I've done the research. I've essentially stalked her. And don't want to use that word. I'm not promoting stalking here. But what I am promoting is that you support and become familiar with their work. Now, everyone is not going to be reaching out to Nobel laureates, right? Perhaps it's someone that you meet at a conference. How can you continue to, if you meet them at a conference, especially if it's a virtual conference, what is something that happened that will give a lasting impression for that person to remember you? What is something that can happen in that interaction that can now make it more personal than a Zoom call? And how can we take that and turn it into a mentor-mentee relationship that is fueled by technology? Therefore, you meet, you figure out a way to meet virtually, you form this relationship, and how do you continue to maintain the relationship? Now, one thing that's really important, I believe this, I'm sure others do not, is that mentor-mentee relationship is managed and maintained primarily by the mentee, and the mentor is invested in the success of the mentee. And this, which is what leads me to my last point, is this is how we begin to form that sponsorship. So Carla Harris talked about a sponsorship and a sponsor being the most important person that you need in this mentoring mosaic. But a lot of us, especially scientists, don't necessarily work in corporate or want to, right? So is a sponsor still the most important person in that relationship is the question. And the answer is yes, but it just looks different, right? So let's say, using the Jennifer Doudna example, I form a relationship with her. She and I become very close, and she becomes now a fan of my work as I am a fan of her work. And that came from me investing and building that relationship, maintaining meetings, maintaining communication, consistent communication, but also very intentional communication to build that relationship. And now she, my mentor, now knows me well enough and now feels comfortable enough and now is invested in me to become my sponsor. And the sponsor, again, is someone who is advocating for you when you are not in the room. This is someone who's so familiar with your work. They want to be there. They want to see you win. So in science, what does that look like? These are just some very loose examples at different stages. If you are a student in the lab, this could look like someone who works in the lab that you want to join. Let's say you're doing rotation. This could be someone who you went to undergrad with, you already have a relationship with this person, and they're like, you know what, Janina, you're great. I'm gonna put you on. More corporate, this looks like someone can help give you access to a job. One of the things I didn't talk about is during my PhD, and actually me getting my PhD was through a sponsor. This was a professor of mine who basically put in a good word and told me about this program at Vanderbilt that I could join. That is a sponsor. This person went out of their way and got into a room that I was not able to get into initially, and then brought me along the way. And that's because I built a relationship with a professor in college who knew me well enough to know Janina wants to get a PhD and is going to be a great scientist. And actually that same professor is why I'm here today. So shout out to Dr. Jackson from Spelman. Okay, and then in my PhD, this transition to, well, how can I didn't actually have anybody that got me into my lab. My lab was more so through experience, but my postdoc, so I told you guys I did a communal postdoc. My relationship that I got in order to get that postdoc was built through my professor, my PhD advisor. Again, this is someone who's advocating for me, saying, hey, you can go and be a postdoc, and you should go and be a postdoc here. I didn't know Erwin Bottinger, who I did my postdoc with at the time, but my professor, she was like, you can go give a talk at this place, there will be plenty of PIs who are looking for postdocs and they'll get to see your work. And so in that regard, she was acting like a sponsor. While she wasn't speaking for me when I wasn't in the room, she was using her seniority, her position, her power to put me on a speaking ledger that would then give me access to a network of people, right? So that was her acting as a sponsor. Then in my postdoc, I actually, my PhD advisor worked on a project. My postdoc advisor worked on a project at Illumina, and working in her lab gave me access to contacts and opportunities at Illumina. I say all that to say that every experience, from my undergraduate experience to getting into a PhD program to getting my postdoc, then taking that postdoc and then going into industry, was all through the hands of a sponsor. So a sponsor is still the most critical relationship, even in science. And this person you will always be the junior to this person. This is written wrong, but this person, you will always be their junior, meaning that they're going to be in a position of power to be able to bring you up. And they also are very familiar with your work. So they've worked with you in some capacity. So this could look like a professor, like the example that I just talked about at Spelman. This could look like your PI, someone who is equally invested because your success helps their success. This could be your department chair, or your committee members if you are already in the PhD program. And in the context of corporate America, this could be your boss. So it's really important to foster these relationships and actually take on some of these mentors and turn them into sponsors. Okay, so how do we do this with technology if you don't already know them? Again, the goal here is someone who will give you access. So this person is more senior to you, but most importantly, this person is in rooms that you are not yet in. This person is someone you already have a relationship with. So ideally, this is a mentor that has now turned into a sponsor. Therefore, it's really important that you become familiar with the rooms that they are in. How do you know the rooms that they are in? So one of the things that you can do, especially on LinkedIn, is on LinkedIn, you can, and ideally you already know this person, so go into their LinkedIn profile, or actually even having these discussions through your mentor-mentee relationship, if you're going that route, can also help you understand and get information on what are the rooms that this person is in and how can I enter those rooms? How can I, in the context of technology in the virtual space, how can I be invited to the same events that this person is invited to? Well, hopefully I've built a relationship and this person knows that my interest is in this. So when they get an invite to this, they say, hey, actually, I want to invite Janina to do this. I want to invite Janina to give a talk on this. I want to invite, Janina, I want to promote Janina for this job. I want her to have this opportunity. And so this relationship, this relationship is kind of a continuation onto an existing relationship. Now, one thing that Carla Harris said that I don't know if I necessarily agree with is that you only tell this person good things. And the reason why I don't necessarily agree with that is because I will say some opportunities have come my way that were not necessarily due to good things. And I guess the way we define good is subjective, but in the context of this, I mean, the way I would say some of my hardships have really shaped me into unique opportunities and positions to do other things. So for example, my podcast, I had never done podcasting before, and someone recommended me to do this, not recommended me, but told me about this Spotify competition and that I should be a part of the competition. I had no experience in podcasting, right? And I, up until that point had no audio experience. Well, then people would send me things that's very specific that, okay, I know that Janina doesn't have any audio experience, may not have a great network in podcasting. I should recommend her for this program. I should recommend her for this opportunity. That is kind of a nuanced, weird, negative, but not necessarily positive. But let's say that there was a speaking opportunity about talking about how you took some L's, how did you overcome difficult things, right? And if your sponsor does not know the difficult things you've overcome, one, they're not going to know when is the right time to put you in the rooms you want to be in, but also what are the right opportunities to help you overcome these things. And so I feel that the sponsor should know both your good and your bad, and the sponsor should also know what are the things that could help you kind of change some of those goods. And I don't want to say rejections, but really like changing these things to redirections, right? How can we use opportunities to create new paths for you? Okay, so that was a lot of talking. These are just some of the resources that I've recommended. I highly recommend that everyone utilize Twitter. Obviously you should follow everyone that is here, and also follow some of the things that I talked about, like those Black N networks. They're not just for Black scientists. They actually have networks for all different types of scientists at different stages. There are people who are, different discussion boards. In Twitter, you can also figure out what are some of the things like topics that you're interested in, and you can follow those topics and add different accounts to those topics. So you're constantly being pinged when someone is talking about X or Y, and you can find out about conferences that way. And of course, these things all lead to you building these relationships that we talked about. Okay, with that, I am done. I don't know exactly how much time we have left. I think this ends at, let me check. We will be ending in 15 minutes. So I wanted to do an interactive discussion. So for the interactive discussion, and I'm trying to get back to, for the interactive discussion, I actually have some questions to ask you. So I am hoping that you can join me either on Clubhouse or on Twitter. I am live on Twitter right now, and I'm also on Clubhouse, but if you don't have those two things, we can get you set up and get you there, or you can just come off video because the camera is pointed to the screen on Twitter. So people can see you. You don't have to come off video, but you can unmute and talk, and we can have a discussion. So I'm gonna stop here and open it up, bring some people who are in the Clubhouse room to the stage to ask some questions. And if there's any comments or things that you want to say, right now is your moment.
Okay, I'm here on Clubhouse.
Hey.
This is my very first time participating in Clubhouse.
Oh,
I
so
have like a whole bunch going on now because I have the Zoom room going, and I can hear that.
I think you can
and then
mute
I
it.
have this. I have to figure out how to turn off the volume on. Okay, that's better. So now I'm only on Clubhouse and I only hear that.
Okay.
So thank you so much. I really enjoyed the presentation. I think that one of the most interesting things that I heard was sorry, that's also my toddler who needs to have a nap in the background.
Aww.
But I think that, you know, like building up the courage to reach out to people on social media and things like that. And I have a Twitter, and I have like a personal Twitter and I have a professional Twitter, and I'm pretty negligent at using both. But I do think that knowing, like, you know, like what you do say is like important conversations happen there. They do. I know a student that has reached out to, you know, potential mentors and things on Twitter. So I think that was also important. I think like the position that I sit in right now, I work with undergraduates, and we're, you know, trying to encourage them and prepare them to pursue biomedical science PhDs. And I often think about like what I can do, you know, in my position, you know, as a mentor / coach, to encourage them to start thinking about, you know, developing these types of relationships, like mentoring relationships, and like also having them be like long-term. Because one of the things I've noticed with them, and I've pointed it out to them, that sometimes they can be kind of transactional. Like, I need this person to do this, and then I have them do that, and then that's it. And then maybe in like a year, I need this person again. And so then they don't know how, you know, they don't know how to continue to cultivate and like develop relationships. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the thing that you have to keep in mind, again, is like this intentionality thing. One of the things I've been recently talking about is like how this translates to community, right? And so, for example, people are always like, we need to recruit diversity in X research study. And that process is very transactional, where it's like, okay, we're going to leverage a group of population that's underrepresented and only include them in that one aspect. You know, I give you data, you give me really nothing in return. It's actually a one-way transaction, and it should never be that way, right? So how can you be intentional in a digital space is in a, you know, leveraging the information that we currently have. For example, like I said, getting to know a person, really using those resources. So it's a two-way street, right? If I'm having a mentor-mentee relationship, it shouldn't be transactional where the mentor is only providing things to the mentee. It should be equally beneficial. And that's one of the things I would say I disagree with Carla Harris is that she says the mentor is the thing is all about you, the mentee. And I would argue that it's also about learning from the mentee how to improve yourself as a mentor, right? Because when you're leveraging or understanding the current landscape of things, that means you're constantly evolving and building up your mentor expertise, if you will, right? Like learning about things like Discord, learning about things like Discord is something that I hadn't heard of if it wasn't for a mentee that exposed me to those things. So it's really important that, like, as much as we want to stray away from technology, I always tell people it's better to figure out how you want to use technology, but also in everything, remember how you want to still be humanized in technology, that you don't want to just have an internet persona and there's emptiness behind it, right? You don't want that. You don't want people to think that. And the best way to avoid that happening is to be yourself. But then you also want to be, you know, you want to make some things private. You want to make sure that you're not like, you know, I don't want to, you know, you don't want to be.
You don't want to overshare. You don't want to overexpose and overshare on the internet.
Yeah.
Like, there is a fine line. Like, and I mean, that's actually something I struggle with. Like, I have a toddler son, right? And so that's probably like the content that I was producing, that would probably be the most things people will be most interested in. But it's just like, I feel like, you know, that's not my place to, you know, give him an internet persona. You know what I mean? And that's like,
he has to consent.
Yeah, so, and I'm not knocking anyone who does anything differently. You know, that was just like something we decided in our household. But you know what I mean? So it's just like, what do I have to say? Like, I'm going to say, I'm just on the couch eating Flamin' Hot Cheetos. You know what I mean? Or I'm watching trash television. But I guess like probably having a discourse about like an article. You know what I mean? Like I could go on there and talk about like, oh wow, Dr. Janina Jeff just gave a wonderful presentation on mentorship coaching. Like, so who are your coaches? Or sorry, who's your mentor? Like, who's your sponsor? You know, like I can see like, you know, like there are prime opportunities to start conversations and connect with people. So I can see that.
And I think with that, when it comes to that, it's kind of like you have to set your own rule book, you know, just kind of like a diet, right? It's like, okay, I know I don't eat pork. Under no circumstances, I don't eat pork. I'm being sarcastic here. I definitely have had pork recently.
I thought you were a vegan.
I was a vegan for a couple of years. Okay, we can use that as an example, right? I was a vegan. I was a vegan for a couple of years, and I didn't eat pork. I mean, I didn't eat anything really. I didn't eat any animal products. And then, you know, saying that's my rule book. I don't eat these things, therefore I will never eat these things. And then I went into a different phase and said, you know what, vegans are super judgy. I don't really want to be a part of this community. I just kind of want to be vegan when I want to be vegan and not be judged by it and not be, you know, I was like, and that was my own personal decision, right? It was a complete thing. So when it comes to social media, you have to kind of have your own diet too, you know, like I don't post anything. I don't post minors on my social media. Like that's just something minors can't consent. You know, people who if it's somebody's wedding or event, you know, I ask for permission because that's their personal life that they've invited me into this intimate space. But if it's something like I'm giving a public speaking engagement, I think that is a very public thing that I can share. There are certain, you know, like my love life, for example, I don't post anything about that on social media. My real friends know what it is. You know what I mean? So like, you have to like figure it out.
Save that for the group chat.
Save it for the group chat. And that's just my personal social media diet. And then as you kind of like develop that diet, indirectly, you are, depending on how you want to leverage social media, you're also developing a brand. So how many of us have found a person that we heard given the talk and we're like, okay, I'm going to follow Farron on all the things, the Twitter, the Clubhouse, the Instagram, all the things. I am following you and trying to be familiar with your work. So whatever you have there is a representation of what I can know you as digitally. Therefore, if you stick to your digital diet, I'm already forming, like, it's really weird, but like, that's really funny. Social media is us doing this personal branding of ourselves and who we are. And it's no different when it comes to identifying and becoming a mentor and a mentee relationship. I actually think the parts that are the coolest, especially for students, in my experience, is also kind of like in that diet, like humanizing some of the things that you do that have been like outside of the academic culture. So yeah, eating Flamin' Hot Cheetos is a Black woman scientist reality, okay? We eat Flamin' Hot Cheetos, we watch trashy TV, and that is a part of the other part, this layered, you know, complexity of who we are, but it actually also makes you a more relatable mentor. So I can see how mentees would be like, I eat Flamin' Hot Cheetos too, you know?
I've been watching Married at First Sight.
Let's talk about
the fact that Clubhouse has changed the game. Like I see some people I follow and I joke because I tell people when I leave my room, like, yeah, you might catch me in these Clubhouse streets in the ratchet room, but you know, I'm also going to be debating about health equity in one of the other rooms.
Yeah.
Clubhouse is going to change things.
So Jasmine, thank you for coming to the stage. Just to give a little bit of background, guys, I am actually giving a talk at a conference, a Leadership Alliance conference, and the title of the talk is Using Technology to Create Your Mentoring Mosaic. And so I'm also on Twitter Live. I don't have anybody on my Twitter, and on Clubhouse. So you mentioned Clubhouse, Jasmine. Is there anything else you wanted to say, or maybe you could tell us about your experience finding mentors or mentees on Clubhouse, or just in general?
Sure. So I am Jasmine Ward. I'm the founder of Black Ladies in Public Health. And I always say that Black Ladies in Public Health just kind of found me because I did not intend on creating an organization. It's an organism instead of organization. And it's definitely flourishing and moving in ways that God has really put into the world for us to, you know, get together. But one of the things I will say is Clubhouse, whereas, you know, most others, social media, you move around, right? And nobody ever knows rooms or whatever.
Sorry.
things a little bit, right? I have you know how you type something and you erase it, you're like, I'm not gonna say that. Let me go back. And then you type again, you erase the whole thing. I'm like, no, I ain't gonna say that. And then you just put okay. Like, you get the freedom to do that when you're writing. But because this is live, what you say is what you say, and you might have to backtrack a little bit, but it's what you say. I mean, it's real time. So I do think that this kind of exposes, huh?
I think there was just some background noise. Go ahead.
Yes, I have to expose people. There was like you know how you might say the first thing you're thinking. So this is gonna be the first thing you're thinking, and you're gonna have to go back and say, like, let me clarify. But I think that it provides an opportunity to really see, you know, how much we all kind of have, you know, it shows personality a little bit more. It just provides an opportunity to really communicate with people in different ways. Now, I know people have me on that little, you know, follow all the time button, because when I go to speaking rooms, I may see a lot of people that I'm connected with just suddenly pop in the room once I get on stage. And for me, that shows that I need to move around differently if I'm going to be on a stage, a ratchet room stage. I might get, and I call it ratchet rooms because I just enjoy using the word ratchet, not ratchet to me. But I get into rooms where things are, you know, there might be a hot debate about a current event or something. I don't expect you to hold me to like my scientific knowledge, you know what I mean? Because I'm talking about something that's pretty normal, casual conversations, things like that, that you might catch me talk. You would not have the opportunity to talk to me about if we were just colleagues at work, right? So I think Clubhouse is going to change some of the dynamic between mentors and mentees, and that's what I think. There might be some strain, right? There might be some disappointment. There might be some relief. She's a regular person. There a lot of that, because I mean, I have actually gone into rooms where I've heard people that I am associated with in public health, and they're talking about something else, and I realize, like, oh, that's how you feel. And to me, that just that heightened my sense of this is we're moving in different on Clubhouse. On this, Jasmine, I'm done speaking. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Jasmine. No, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think Clubhouse is a perfect opportunity. So one of the things we talked about in the talk is like, it's really difficult to build a relationship with someone you haven't met. And Clubhouse has now been, I would say, probably one of the most human-friendly technology platforms that give you access to a person live and direct and just as organic as possible. People still, you know, flex on who they are on Clubhouse, you know. There's Dr. Sebi, you know, experts in every room, right? And there's, you know, people who are trying to be faux experts. So you do have issues with that. But I say all that to say, though, you really do get access to someone's unfiltered, you know, typo-free I shouldn't say typo-free, the opposite of typo-filled personality, which actually humanizes them. So thank you, Jasmine. So we have some people on the stage who I know well, who are also a part of my mentoring Mosaic. And I just want to invite them to speak. So we have Lauren. Lauren, I don't know if you have something to say.
Hi, everyone. I'm really enjoying the conversation. I too, like Farron, am a mother of a toddler, so my time on social media has definitely been limited, but I think Clubhouse too is something that it kind of goes on like sometimes through the night. So when I can, you know, I can hop into conversations that are interesting to me, and also that, you know, whether it be some ratchery or if it's something that is aligned with my professional goals or things that I want to attain. So I just think overall, like Janina said, it's something that you can get an actual view of a person, whereas Instagram or Facebook or something like that, you might connect with somebody after meeting them, but you kind of see glimpses into their lives, but not who the person actually is. I think Twitter is probably a bit better because you can kind of, you know, talk a little bit more. But Clubhouse, definitely, I think that this technology could be used to craft your mentoring mosaic. And I do know a lot of people who have met experts in the field. I think people feel more comfortable coming into this space because it will show whether you know what you're talking about or not. You know, maybe not in the beginning, but over time, the authenticity will be revealed. So thank you. And I'm enjoying it.
Yes, thank you, Lauren. And I just want to talk about, like, one thing I want to also say is that I think a lot of times when we think about mentors and we think about creating this mentor mosaic, we think it has to be a very professional thing, right? Like Farron mentioned, like there's usually this idea, or I should say we have in academia made a culture, or I should just say in just professionalism, that, you know, a mentor is a person who has this distinct role, and they, you know, they don't even watch Ratchet TV or go in Ratchet rooms or even use the word ratchet. They sit around in a tie and a business suit all day. And, you know, we just have this very distorted idea. It's almost like we're not even giving them the privilege of being human, right? We all have these different layers. And I think we become closer connected when we embrace those things. So I think it's really important to incorporate that into our mentoring style and mentorship. And the reason why I bring that up with Lauren is because, you know, sometimes your mentors are also your friends. Sometimes your mentors are also a part of your community. Sometimes they're your family. Like, I definitely have friends that I call on for X issue, friends that I call on for Y issue, you know, just like you have your nail person, or you have the person who cuts your hair or who does this, and you like the very specific thing they do. Really building out your mentoring network can be as diverse as that, where you have certain parts of your professional life that you trust with certain people. For example, when I'm going and getting a new job, there are only a certain people I call about negotiation and the people, or how I should negotiate. And those people are the people I know who've negotiated things that I'm like, oh, you did a great job with that. I want to know how you did it. Can you teach me how to do it, or what's reasonable if you've already been in this field? So really trying to make it applicable. All right. I'm going to let Antonio speak and then Nikki speak, and then we're going to close the room because I think we're over time for the talk. And I'm shocked that they haven't put us back into the main room, but.
Hi, everyone. My name is Antonio. So I think, like, with Clubhouse and just social media in general, like, just to give a quick background on like my interests and things like do, like I work in the media industry and content production. So like Clubhouse has been great to like connect with other professionals in that space. Like, and there's also other interests I have, like in real estate development. I have hobbies like in music production. And so when I talk, you know, when we think about mentors, you know, traditionally it's like in that, just in your career setting, like your daytime job. But, you know, through Clubhouse, like I started getting back into more music production. So I was in a Clubhouse with producers, and like, you know, having conversations about like equipment and getting advice about jumping back into that. And then even in crypto, which I've been getting into, like finding people that are also kind of this, you know, been investing in crypto and getting advice from them, and then actually like connecting with them offline from Clubhouse, and then really start to build a network in that space. So it's really, you know, outside of just my daytime job, really, you know, giving me a whole network and mentors to for each of those things that I'm interested in as well. So it's really, even through like real estate, like I met someone that's actually may become an investor of mine for one of the projects that I'm working on and trying to build where I live here in New Jersey. So it's definitely opened up some doors since I joined a couple months back. So.
Thank you, Antonio. It's really good to hear the experience of others, because especially those, our conversation has been focused mostly on science and how we create this mentoring mosaic in science. But I think one thing that's really important is that these things go beyond just science and in the professional. A lot of these tools and applications can be used in any field. So it's great to hear your experience in communication in real estate. And I don't want to pronounce your name wrong. Is it Nurs?
No, that's just, hi, this is just Nikki. It's
Oh, Nikki. I was going to call you Nikki, but it wasn't on there. Okay.
Yeah, but I call myself Nurse Nikki because my primary training is as a nurse. I'm currently a clinical scientist with a pharmaceutical company working in their vaccines group, but I'm also a DR student and kind of an emerging public health practitioner. And hopefully that'll be my pinnacle role outside of pharma once I leave there. And what I'm doing right now, yay, is building my mentoring Mosaic. And I was hoping to, even though I joined this late, hoping to kind of get some insights on how successful people have been with identifying mentors in this Clubhouse space. I mean, I've been stalking some great people on Twitter and of course on Black women in public health. Dr. Ward, I'm one of those people that stalks you when you are on Clubhouse. So Dr. Ward, awesome. I'm gonna check and see what it's about. But definitely kind of like what are some kind of do's and don'ts and things to look out for in this Clubhouse space when you're identifying mentors and building your network? That was a question that I had.
That's an excellent question. I'm gonna let Jasmine answer the question, and then I'll add on to whatever she has to say.
Yeah, one of the things I was gonna say is I don't trust a Clubhouse for like as far as I could actually press the button and glitch. I would say always check for like LinkedIn connection. Like I Google people, like I don't even play games no more. Some of these people who claim to be VCs and all this other stuff, some of them, everybody can't be a venture capitalist. Okay. I just don't believe it. And so I'm looking to see like, what's their portfolio, who they're connected with. My husband and I just like literally had this conversation not too long ago about, you can have people here who are aspiring, right? And I totally get it and I'm here for it. But I do think that to a certain extent, like you have to know people beyond Clubhouse because Clubhouse will have you all the way messed up because you are going to come into contact with people who will have a lot in their bios and claim to have a lot going on and they don't. But then you'll have people who literally are humble and they'll say like, I'm somebody, I'm just trying to make it. And you go look them up, you're like, oh my God, so it just really can depend because this is not something that is like vetted. There's no, real connection. Like there's nothing like you have to press to say I went to Harvard, right? I can just put it in my bio and keep it moving. So I do think that the fact that you have the ability to vet people is important and use all of those skills. But I do think that generally outside of education, I love to hear, I'm a qualitative person. I like to hear stories. I think I value experience. I do think that sometimes that goes a much further in terms of relationship than you're just having the education. So it just depends because a mentor, it depends on what you're looking for a mentor to do, I believe. And I do look for mentors who just can help me be a better mother. I'm not always looking for a mentor in public health. Mm-hmm. I might be looking for a mentor in real estate, which I am, Antonio, so I did hear that. It just depends, so you got to know what you're looking for. And so I think that's important.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think one of the things I like that what you said is about vetting people. And I think, again, going back to I think one of the things we have to learn when it comes to mentoring is that it's a one-way relationship. It actually is a two-way relationship, right? It should be an equally beneficial relationship, especially because I'll talk a little bit more science here. When we talk about engaging with communities that are underrepresented, we can't just want to use them for data. We actually have to make sure we incorporate them in our ecosystem in academia, make sure that they are also the people asking the questions and doing the research, and making sure that we return things that are equitable. And so we could think about the same thing in the context of the mentor and mentee relationship. As a mentor, you want to make sure that you're using your time valuable because in some cases, you'll get to a point where a lot of people want your time, right? How do you make sure that time is valuable, that you gain something as a mentor and that your mentee is also gaining something, right? And so that vetting process is crucial, and kind of like talking about what you represent and kind of creating your brand is not something that we talk about in science, because in science, your brand is literally the papers you publish and the work that you do. And I think that is true, But also a part that has made, I should say, a brand more unique, or actually creating these new niches. And I think that's one of the things social media has done a great job of for Black people, is bringing into our culture and how our culture is intersected with our professional life, and how that creates a whole new, opportunity, or I should say space, for us to live and do work in a safe manner that's equitable, that's beneficial. And I don't think we would have that safe space if it weren't for places like Clubhouse and social media. So Nikki, kind of getting back to your point, one of the things, your question, one of the things that you missed on during the talk, I was talking about how you kind of need to identify these 3 key stakeholders in your mentorship mosaic. The first person being an advisor. An advisor is a person that you go to ask very specific questions. And so this person probably works in your field. It could be a technical question, but it's a very tailored question. And you're very direct. And this person, knows the answer to that question. And so people like that, where you find places like that, you can find them on Clubhouse, but some other places would be like a Discord community. So I'm pretty sure that there's a Discord community on health equity, or like a lot of these in the last year, a lot of communities on Twitter have been doing like Black in Neuro, or Black in genetics, and Black in X science discipline. And so you can leverage those experiences and connect with people on these chats like Discord or Slack to meet them and actually get to know them a little bit better. But the advisor is a person you ask a specific question to, like, hey, I'm applying to PhD programs. What should I be doing? What should I not be doing? Or, hey, I'm interviewing for X and Y. A mentor is someone who knows you personally. And this person knows you personally, likely went through the same experience that you went through, so they can give better insight to a situation that you're going through. You can be transparent with this person. Like, I went to work today and Becky tried me. I really need your advice because I don't know if I'm tripping. Is she being racist? Did she talk to me incorrectly? This person could be your friend. This person could be your coworker, ex-coworker, someone who works in your space, but also understands your experience. Ideally, this person should also be dealing with the same identity that you present in this space, to kind of make sure you can understand questions of like, is this specific problem rooted in some trauma that I'm dealing with? And they have to know you, right? Know you well enough, and know your work well enough and how you work. Or is it something else? And this is someone that you really trust, and that, remember, you're asking for feedback and they can give you feedback back. I think you can build these relationships in places like Clubhouse and Discord and all that, but the key there is that you have to build it, right? And it's that, putting in the effort and the time and the energy. For me, for example, I've met mentees on Instagram and Clubhouse and all these places, but the ones who I actually talk to regularly, they've done the work to connect with me on a personal level and have maintained the communication and have continuously, a lot of times when someone doesn't message you back, it's literally because they have forgotten. And so be very intentional about the messages and things that you do. And that goes back to getting the research. And then the last person is a sponsor. And a sponsor is a person who a lot of times could graduate from being a mentor, and it's a professional relationship. And the sponsor actually works at your organization or works at a place where you want to be. And that person knows you, is familiar with your work, is a fan of your work, is a fan of you as a person. And that person vouches for you when you're not in the room. And so when you're not in the room, Nikki is so bomb. Nikki does X, Y, and Z. Nikki is asking these complicated questions, and we need Nikki here. If Nikki is not in this room, we are losing. This person really rides for you and advocates for you. And the key thing is that they understand you and your work. They're a fan of you and your work, and they see the value that you bring into any room. Okay, I hope that was helpful.
This was wonderful. It was. Thank you so much. And it's a little twist on how I've heard it described before. So I feel like I'll start off in the advisor space here in Clubhouse as I start to build out, and then